Hello everybody, I'm Richard Gon of Work to Live podcast version. This time, what I'd like to talk about is how Chinese people are like means how European people are like, which is what I'd like to talk about. So, first of all, maybe I don't know where you live in, but if you live in, for example, if you live in the United States, so anyway, wherever you live in, wherever you live in, I'm sorry for my bad pronunciation of English language, but wherever you live in, maybe you have seen in the course of your life, maybe you have seen Chinese people. I'm not, I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying any joke. So please understand what I have just said literally. So if I ask you, or let me ask you a question. The question is, have you ever seen Chinese people in the course of your life from the beginning of your life and until now? Have you ever seen any Chinese people all over the world? So as you know, I'm Japanese. I'm a Japanese person, and maybe some of you might not have seen Japanese people or a Japanese person, but maybe if you have witnessed some Asian people, maybe in most cases they are Chinese people. So Chinese people, there are many Chinese people all over the world. So to start with, mainland China has more than 1 billion Chinese people, and apart from which there are not hundreds, there are millions of Chinese people all over the world. For example, so for example, except for mainland China, maybe at least there are many Chinese people living in Singapore, for example. And so even if you live in European countries, there are many Chinese people, including the tourists coming from China. So I'm recording this episode in the time of the pandemic of coronavirus, which means maybe you don't see Chinese people in the vicinity of your residences. I'm sorry. So maybe essentially you don't see Chinese people near your house or near your home. So anyway, what I so why I decided to talk about this is because I think most of you have seen Chinese people. So maybe you have got some question. Maybe you have I thought you have got I thought you had got some question. And for example, how are Chinese people like, or what kind of culture Chinese people have, or what kind of culture do Chinese people have, or how how do Chinese people live on, stuff like that. Because mainland China has a lot of problems, and maybe most of you know that. For example, the 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 largest and the most recent one, is the persecution against Uyghur people, which is done by the persecution is done by the government of mainland China. But here, here, anyway. So what I'd like to tell you is that it's really difficult to summarize Chinese people. Not summarize. I don't know whether it's correct to say summarizing Chinese people or summarizing some people. So for example, if you ask me how Japanese people are like, so it's difficult to summarize, or it's difficult to tell you the outline of Japanese people, because as you know, if you are grown up, I think you have already understood that there are many types of people, or there are many people, and they have different characteristics each other. If you are grown ups, I think, well, I'm sure you can understand such a thing, or such kind of things. But but still, it's possible to carve the outline of some people or it's possible to describe the outline or the general characteristic of some people or some other people of of a specific country. For example, so just is that if you ask me how, or if I ask you how, for example, if I ask you how French people are like, so maybe if you're a French person, or if you know some French people, you can understand or you can describe so you can describe how French people are like, for example. So if you ask me how Japanese people are like, so I can. So my answer is Japanese people like to follow rules. Well, Japanese people do not deviate away from. Or the Japanese people hate to deviate from the rules or from the standard. So which means Japanese people have such kind of feature, such kind of a feature or some such kind of features, or Japanese people have such kind of characteristics uh, as a whole. And another one is another feature is like, for example, Japanese people are quiet, and still another stuff is Japanese people are not so good at speaking English or Japanese. That might be an insult. So apart from the proficiency of English language of Japanese people, so how should I say? Japanese people, for example, Japanese people are Asian people, and Japanese people are fairly kind to other people. So, if you, for example, if you could come to Japan, and if you ask somebody how to, for example, how to get to where, or how to get to some place, maybe some people or most people may may deal with your questions kindly or gently. So of course, most people do not understand English language, or most people. Some people, of course, some Japanese people can understand English language, but them in most cases they are not so good at English. They are not so good at speaking English language. Maybe that is really comprehensible, or you can understand such things, or you can understand the proficiency of English language of Japanese people by listening to my pronunciation. Anyway, so but also I just told you that the proficiency of English language of Japanese people is not so high. It's not so high, or the proficiency of English language of Japanese people is low. But some but it's different from the characteristics, or the general characteristic of Japanese people. That the general characteristic of Japanese people is like they are kind, and they do they follow the rules, so they follow the standards of the community those Japanese people belong to. So language, and I'm sorry. So I almost digressed from the course of from the original course of the story. So going back. So the main topic is not that Insular Nation. The main topic is not the Insular Nation located to the east part of mainland China, but mainland China is the central topic of this episode. So if you, so you know so what I'd like you to know this time is that as I as I posted as not a posted as I post the example of the general characteristic of French people. So if you ask not if you ask me, if you ask some Chinese people about the general characteristic of Chinese people, that is really a difficult question for the Chinese people, because for example, how should I say? So it's fine. I think it's sort of easy to ask some German people, or some people from from some European countries about how, for example, how German people are like. That is fairly easy. I think that is sort of easy. But China has a lot of cultures different to each other. For example, so how to which extent each Chinese region are different is like, for example, so if there's a Chinese, if there's a Chinese from some place different from the center was a capital city or the urbanized city of China. So he or she must speak accented Chinese, or he or she speak a dialect of Chinese language. And maybe some people maybe some of you have heard of Cantonese, or as there are other types of languages. So Taiwanese is, you know, it's difficult to deal with, because in Taiwan says Taiwan is different country from the mainland China, while some countries think Taiwan is categorized into the same country as mainland China. So anyway, so for example, like the case of Cantonese, China has many dialects, and those dialects are really different each other to the extent to the extent to which people from different people from Chinese people coming from different regions can't talk to each other only by using their own dialects, or only using their own accents, or their accented Chinese language. So to communicate each other in such a in such a situation where there are some Chinese people coming from well, each of who is from different region each other. Like, for example, somebody is from, for example, Chongqing, and another Chinese is from, for example, some city in Fujian province, and some Chinese, and there's a Chinese person coming from, for example, so Tianjin, for example, and some person might not be ethnically Han people. So maybe I have told you before, or episodes before, that the majority people of China is Han people, but some people might not be some people are not Han people. So in such a situation, some people, or most people may be Han people, but some people may not be Han people. For example, another person might be from, for example, where should I pause? For example, Nanjing. Anyway, so language. If there are, for example, 5 to 10 people, for example, and coming, and if there is a place where some 5 to 10 Chinese people gathered, this is a hypothetical situation, and they began to speak out their own dialects, for example, or their own mother tongues. Communication might not be established, because they can't understand what others are speaking out. Which that is a Chinese language, or that is China. That is a China, which means, what I'd like you to know is like, what I'd like you to know in this time is that, in mainland China, there are many cultures, or there are many customs, and those customs are different, and the differences, such as cultural differences, and the differences of custom create the differences of languages, which is why people coming from different regions of China can't talk to each other only by using their own mother tongues, or their own dialects, which is why Mandarin is necessary to talk with. For example, if you if there are 2 Chinese people, for example, coming, one is from Chongqing and the other is from, for example, so Nanjing. So in such a situation, they have, I don't know much about the I don't know much about the dialects of China, of continental China, but in such a situation, I think they have to use Mandarin Chinese, or Putonghua in Chinese language, to communicate each other. China is such a China is such a country, or China is such a state. So, but in the case of some European countries, so people using different languages can talk to each other. So this is really special to the Asian people because if 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 our language, our means Asians, so if if languages are different, it's impossible to communicate without using, for example, English language or Mandarin Chinese language. So this is which is the situation of Asian countries. But in European countries, it is said that it is said that people who speak Spanish can talk with people who speak Portuguese. Such a situation is established, which is what I have heard before. And I don't know how they can communicate each other because some people speaking Spanish, some people some people speaking Spanish can be understood by some people else speaking or understanding Portuguese. So to establish such a situation, both of them have to, be able to understand the languages of each others. For example, in such a case, for example, so if you're a Spanish person and if I'm a Portuguese person, and if you speak to talk you and I, so to enable not to talk between you and I, to enable a communication between you and I. So you speak Spanish, and if when you speak Spanish, I have to understand Spanish, and if I speak Portuguese, you have to understand Portuguese. Such a situation has to be created. Does it make sense? So this is really complicated for we as for us Asian people because for example in another cases, so so if you're a Japanese person and if I'm a, for example, Vietnamese person, so I'm not Vietnamese, but so if you so to enable communication between you and I, and when you speak Japanese language, and I have to understand Japanese language to establish a communication. So when I speak Vietnamese language, you have to understand Vietnamese language, but Japanese language and Vietnamese languages are different. Or I would like to know whether there are any common points, or there are any common structures of as languages. I'd like to know whether there is any common features between those two languages. So truth is there may be some common points between Vietnamese language and Japanese language, because the Vietnamese language is a part of Vietnamese language is also influenced by Chinese language, which is why maybe I think there are some shared vocabularies. But this is just my speculation. Most Japanese people do not understand Vietnamese language, and neither do Vietnamese people. So Vietnamese people living in Japan may be able to understand Japanese language, but as maybe Vietnamese people living in Vietnam can't understand Japanese language. So going back to China, so China has a lot of different cultures which are different each other, which impede the communications among people coming from different regions. But in the case of European culture, or in the case of European languages, people speaking different languages can talk to each other in some cases. Of course, German language can talk with people speaking French language only by using their own mother tongues. So in the case, if such a communication is if such a communications are enabled, so both of them have to understand their own languages each other. So, for example, if you are a German person, if I'm a French person, so if you speak German language, I have to understand German language. And if I speak, so when I speak French language, you have to understand French language. So so in that conversation, we speak different languages, but we understand different languages other than our own mother tongues. Does it make sense? So going back to the original topic, so I have consumed a lot of time, I have consumed quite a long time. So going back to the original topic of this episode, so how Chinese people are like means how European people are like is summarizing European countries into a into some outline or some or carving European cultures and create some outline is really difficult. Summing up European cultures, a bunch of European cultures, or summing up all the European cultures is really difficult. Or it's really a tough business. So if you ask some Chinese people how are Chinese people like, so what you're doing is such a tough stuff. So what you're doing is to ask those Chinese people to do such a overloading stuff, because summing up Chinese culture is really difficult. It's too difficult for each Chinese person to do such things, which is what I'd like you to know this time. So finally, I would like you to know that each culture is different, but each culture has good points and bad points, which I what I'd like you to know this time. So let's stop racial segregation at last. So let me finish with this. So that's it. Thank you very much for your listening. See you.